Hi, welcome to the Wonder and Whimsy podcast. I'm Kimberly, and this is...
I'm Justin Mullinex. I'm glad to be here.
Yes, thank you for joining me today. We are going to be discussing Contingency, Irony, and Solidarity, a book by Richard Rorty. So we will be reading some of his passages and talking about the philosophical ideas. If you like philosophy and literature and art, please subscribe to this channel. And we'll dive right in. So you're welcome to read the first quote that you picked.
We've been diving in, so
know,
we had to. Now we're glad you can join us. Okay, so the first quote is: "The novel, the movie, and the TV program have gradually but steadily replaced the sermon and the treaty as the principal vehicles of moral change and progress." Just a mouthful.
Yes. I really like this because it's suggesting that nowadays storytelling through TV and film and every form of storytelling is actually more influential over our morals and our ethics than clergy or church or things like that.
The traditional
ethical modalities.
Lawgivers of the people that you would turn to traditionally. And I think kind of what he's saying is that it is just the progression of things.
Yeah.
And in a way, I think he was saying that they were telling their stories too. So he's not excluding them, as being like, oh, well, that was wrong and this is right.
Right.
He's just saying that now we have these different means of communication. It used to be you just had your church. And so you go to church and these are the people that would tell you the stories.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody would contest that religion has a lot of parables and stories that are right in line with this kind of stuff. So before TV, before even books used to be really expensive to make back in the day. It's not like you just could have a book in the house. Somebody had to hand write it in order even to have it.
Yeah.
So before the printing press. So now we have all these different kinds of communication that are able to get these stories widespread to anywhere. And now, of course, in the age of the internet, it's like, any story you want all the time.
Right. Yeah.
So it's an interesting thing to think of, because I think we always thought of philosophy will tell us how to get morals. Religion will tell us how to get morals. These have a special place that they operate. Science will do facts, and religion will do morals. But I think what we've come to realize is that we're constantly telling each other stories about what we should and shouldn't do based upon showing people how to be empathetic towards other people. So when you show a film to somebody, for instance, just like let's just go ahead and swing big, like Schindler's List.
Oh gosh.
I mean, let's swing big, you see that movie and you're going,
it affects you so much more profoundly than just reading about it.
Yeah.
And at least for me, when I saw that movie, I had a really hard time sleeping for a few days. And that affected me a lot more than just reading about it.
Right. Just hearing it because it was a compelling story.
Yeah.
He found a way to tell the story in a way that we knew the story, but he found a way to tell it better than it had ever been told. Which is like important. And all of a sudden, you have a newfound respect for this stuff, and your empathy does increase, and you start to think about these things. And even on one thing I noticed years ago, and I think we all noticed it. It used to be when you would watch a television show or you would watch a movie or even sometimes read a book, there were like clearly good and bad characters.
Yeah.
It was
they were like the good guys, the protagonists, and the antagonists, the villains.
This person always did the good stuff. This person always did the bad stuff. And then I think you started to see, and I think from my recollection, when HBO started kind of making like really good shows. You know what I'm saying? When they started making like when all of a sudden TV was like as good as a movie.
Yeah.
You started to see like morally ambiguous characters,
Right.
like Tony Soprano. Right?
Yeah.
Where like he's obviously like a bad guy, but he's complex. And there's layers, and even the good, and then it trickled over into even the people that are the good people would still do bad stuff sometimes.
Shades of gray. I think those are the best characters, at least to play as an actor,
Right.
and also just to watch as a viewer, because they're relatable. Most human beings aren't always 100% good and angelic. And I don't think most human beings are always evil. Most of us aren't one-dimensional. Most of us have layers.
I would go as far as to say is that all of us,
Yeah.
you know, like even and you know, there's obviously, you know, you don't want to like culpability upon people, like people, you know, to be held responsible for their actions and stuff. But I heard someone say one time, like, yeah, you know, it's like Saddam Hussein's son was a really bad, evil guy, but he had like the unfortunate upbringing of being Saddam Hussein's son.
Yeah.
You know, so this wasn't just like some, you know, moral deficiency. Like he was made that way, and a lot of the times when you see people who commit like heinous crimes, when you see people who do like terrible stuff, you're like, that isn't just a normal reaction to what they did. Like something made them that way.
Yeah.
And so I think reflecting that through art and through television and movies and stuff, it kind of makes us go, you know what? Maybe people are more complicated than we used to give them credit for. It's not just the evil guy and the good guy, and the good guy's always doing good stuff and the bad guy's always doing bad stuff.
Yeah.
And then we see that in ourselves too, because we also know that we're capable of great good. And we're also capable of doing some bad stuff too.
Yeah, and there's so many shades of gray. Nothing is ever just black and white. And whenever we can watch someone's story through film or read about someone's story through literature, and we had this notion of like, no, they were just bad. They were just inherently evil or whatever. But when we realize how they were raised, what environment they were born into, and we start to understand why they made those choices that were destructive, and we actually feel empathy.
Yes.
I think that is a beautiful thing, because that helps us cultivate more unity and less division. So I think what I think he's saying here is that through the medium of storytelling, through art, through literature, through filmmaking, and through music, because music is storytelling.
It is. It's all communication. Art,
Yeah.
all this art is communication. He's
Yeah.
basically just saying art.
Yes.
Yeah.
So through all of that, I think great art helps us become more empathetic and understanding, and it opens our mind to a different perspective. So I definitely agree with him on this quote. What do you agree?
I couldn't agree more, I don't think.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that if you put this to people, that it would be hard for them to disagree with it, because it's obvious that we have shaped like the moral landscape by telling stories. And it's not just these stories. It's just we've gotten better and better at telling the stories.
Yeah.
And like you said, digging into shades of gray, as opposed to like, you know, simple stories, which can be great too. I mean, I love a good hero story.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with it, you know. But seeing it become more complex, and like you said, kind of just developing our empathy and saying, oh, you know, it's just like some people say, like Thanos. They're like, I kind of see what he was talking about, you know. But you want a complicated character. You don't want somebody who's just doing bad stuff for bad stuff's sake. And I think everybody kind of sees that and goes, you know what? It's like having a family member who, like, maybe have done some bad shit before, but you still love them, and and maybe they had a bad childhood. So you feel, because they're close to you and you've seen it. Yeah. You're living the story. You've seen the story, and you go, man, they had a rough upbringing, and whatever was going on, blah, blah. And so that's why they're like this. And all of a sudden it kind of helps you too, because you don't hold that grudge like you would before.
Yeah.
You don't stay in that headspace where you can't forgive and you can't understand. And all that does is hurt you, right? I was talking to somebody recently and I was like, you don't forgive somebody for them. You forgive
Yeah.
somebody for you.
I think sometimes it's a little of both for me. It feels like it's a little of both, but it's definitely not just for them.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah.
Because it's not healthy to hold resentment in your heart. It's not
Mhm.
healthy to hold that feeling of anger and resentment. It's healthy for you to release it.
Yeah.
And also, if somebody hurts you, whether it's intentional or not, well, that just means they have power. If you hold on to the resentment, that's just allowing them to have power over you.
Yeah.
So when you can release it, it's freeing.
It's freeing.
So
It's for your psychological state as much as it is for anybody else's. I mean, even if you don't want to do it, the point is that through developing, through having nuanced stories and through developing your empathy, you have the tools to be able to do that. You have the tools to be like, you know what? It's just like somebody in like, see, sometimes you see like a courtroom and they're like, somebody has like done something heinous, like murdered the woman's son, and they walk up and they're like, but I forgive you. Like, how it always seems so powerful, and it is powerful because it's like, all right, this is no longer a source of pain.
yes.
And while I'm not like inviting you over to my house or anything, there's nothing wrong with like not inviting that thing back into your life, but that doesn't mean that you have to hold on to the resentment.
Right.
Because now you have a newfound empathy, and you might go, man, it sucks that their life turned out like that, that led to this terrible thing they did.
Yes, I think great stories can teach us about forgiveness and also teach us about other ethics and other morals.
Yep.
So we both agree with this quote that
Yeah, I think
that
this is the one that got it started.
yes.
Yeah.
So I guess that also raises the question of accountability as creatives. So once we become aware of how powerful storytelling can be in shaping our morals and shaping our values, to me, that makes me feel like I have a responsibility as a creative to tell the right kind of stories that are going to have a positive impact.
And the ones that you're capable of telling.
Yes. Speaking my truth as I see it.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that actually reminds me of a different quote. That
the segue, the perfect segue.
Yes. So he writes here that truth is made rather than found. I thought that was a really interesting quote, because a lot of us go about philosophy even and psychology with this idea of, oh, I have to find the truth instead of creating the truth. And he also talks about how perhaps truth isn't objective. Truth is something that we create through language and through context.
Which is a controversial take.
But
I'm here for it.
Yeah, I know. It is controversial, but I think it's an interesting idea to think about, like, maybe there is no reality, only perspective, and that we create our truth with the limitations that we have with language. And that's how we try to make sense of the world. But it's just an interesting idea. And it is definitely like a bold way of rethinking what
everything that we were taught growing up. Well, it's Nietzsche was famous for there are no facts, just interpretations, which is the same kind of thing.
Same idea, yeah.
And in philosophy, you had Wittgenstein, who was basically like the father of what they call the linguistic turn.
Yeah.
Right? And so you had this thing where people started to go, maybe we're a little bit more removed from reality than we thought we were.
Yeah.
And not only maybe, but it really looks like we are. like we keep trying to solve these problems of truth for since Plato.
I know.
You know,
And
So-
it's have we made progress?
and we haven't really made it. In fact, the
I don't-
progress has kind of gone. Maybe we haven't. Now, I want to buffer this by saying this isn't to say that there isn't something going on, like a reality that is happening. It's just that it doesn't have the properties that we think it does. The properties, like, like, oh, here's a blue cable. That's not a property of it. That's a property of our experience of it, right? So it's not like there's some intrinsic blueness to this.
No, we just call it blue. Right. We create a name for things.
Right, and it's specific to our experience. So let's say we were just creatures that had no sight.
Yeah.
Is the universe blue? Is this cable blue? It's not blue, right? It's not. It's doing other things that if you were capable of sight, you might see it as blue. Or maybe not. Maybe you're colorblind, or maybe they're switched, or who knows?
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of the thing. There's the idea of like the map is not the territory. Have you heard that before?
The map is not the territory.
Right. So we're kind of like looking at a map, and we've always just assumed that it is just a one for one reflection of the actual territory.
Yeah.
Right. But it's not. It's not only is it not, but we have to experience, and then since we can't be in each other's heads, we have to now use language to communicate that experience to the other person. So if you and I want to come to some sort of truth value about something, there's things that are easy to come to, like gravity, like does it, even though some people will deny that too. But we still see the phenomenon of things, of like things dropping, right? Now we can argue about what causes it or not. But there's things that I can go, hey, when I do this and this drops, I notice that. Do you notice that? And then you go, I do also notice that.
Yes.
Right? Science.
Yeah.
Then you've done science. And it gets trickier and trickier as it goes on. And then there are things that are a little bit more open to interpretation.
Yes.
Yeah. And then there's also the idea. This is one of my favorite ones. There's the idea of a phenomenal thing that has what they call a first-person ontology. And this is something like a pain. Okay, so let's say you stub your toe and you go, I'm in pain, right? It is true, because if you do feel pain, you are in fact feeling pain. It's something that we can actually know for real. Right? There's no way you can't not be feeling pain. It's a feeling that you're having. So whether it comes through you stubbing your toe, or maybe you hallucinated the pain, doesn't matter. If you're in that state of pain, you are in fact, like that is a true statement. I am feeling pain. That's a different statement than maybe anything else. Like, this is blue, and then you can sit there and go, well, it's not really blue. It's actually every other color besides blue, because it's actually absorbing all that, but that's the only thing it's reflecting. So it's not blue. It's just that the light that it reflects is blue, and you can go into this whole thing and look at it from a million different perspectives. But if I go, I stub my toe, I'm in pain, then that's like an actual real knowable thing. It's not like there's no way for it to not be true unless you're literally lying about it.
Yes. Or unless you're just a crazy person, there is a disorder out there where people think that they're feeling pain and they're not. But it's real for them. It's true for them.
Exactly.
So
even if it's hallucinated,
yes,
it's still true.
It's true for them.
Yeah.
Right. So they're speaking what is true for them, which also, it goes back to this idea that perhaps there is not an objective truth. There's just subjective truth. So, I like to wonder about that idea, but I'm still uncertain if I agree with it or not.
It's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
And it honestly has to do with American pragmatism.
Yes, it's like a bridge to pragmatic thinking.
Yeah. The pragmatists kind of came out of like going against the logical positivists who were like, science is the best way, and the only knowledge that we can have is through science, and that's the only way we can know stuff. And they're like, is it?
Mhm.
Is it really? Because then you start to. This is something I always do. They're like you have people who are like, logic is the way we know things. I'm like, okay. Do you have any logic as to why I should trust logic?
Yeah, what's the logical reason for trusting
And they
logic?
go, short circuit. And I'm like, no, it's okay. You use logic because it works.
Mhm.
You use it because it works. And then I go, pragmatism. So,
Yeah.
and it's the same thing with science. Science builds models
Yeah.
of stuff.
Mhm.
And these models are very, very useful to us.
Mhm.
And so, do I believe in science? Yes, absolutely.
Mhm.
Not as like an arbiter of truth,
Yeah.
but as a super effective language.
Yes, that we made.
Yeah.
We created science. Science wasn't just here before us.
Yeah.
Science wasn't just this eternal thing that existed before.
Right. It's a method. It's
a method for trying to understand why things.
And what
work
do?
the way
We
they
go, hey, I'm blah, 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 blah. Does this work? Does this get my desired result? Yes. Hey, will you try this and see if it gets the same result for you? And the other person goes, it does get the same. It's just like dropping. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's intersubjective agreement as opposed to objectivity.
Yeah.
Which is honestly fine for me.
Mm.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
I'm fine with going, hey, do you see this? And they go, yeah. And I go, okay, we will call that true. And
yes.
And because we know what it means to say it's true.
Uh-huh.
But it's kind of like ineffable, though. Like the truth, like a perfect sentence that is true in the real nature of reality and from all different vantage points.
Intrinsically true is, I don't know if there's no way of proving that there is anything that is intrinsically true.
Okay, so think about it like this too. Think about it like this. So this is something that Rorty definitely hinges everything on. So, like an apple. So when you say like reality, like there's truth, like there's truth in reality or something like that. You say this is true. Only sentences can be true or false. Only and not even a spoken, but any kind of language sentence about something can have a truth value of true or false.
Because how do you communicate truth?
An apple can't be true or false, but statements about the apple can be true or false.
Yeah.
So we like to conflate truth with reality when truth is just a property of a sentence we feel like we can call true.
Truth is a word.
Yeah. Once it's part of it itself,
Yeah.
And so imagine a universe with no consciousness and no language.
Then what is truth in that universe?
That's the
How
truth.
do you
And that's where your mind goes.
Yeah.
That's where your mind goes. Ah.
Yeah, but that's when you start to understand what he's saying is that our truth is based on language. Without language, how can you say what is true and what's not? You really can't. So that's what I think he's saying with this.
Mhm.
And I think it's an interesting viewpoint that, it can kind of reframe how we talk about and reframe how we discuss knowledge, right?
Mhm.
How do we know something is true?
Yeah.
So I think it's a great quote.
Yeah, it is. He's full of those.
Yes.
It's hard to pare them all down, but we're trying to be pithy with the quotes, and I feel like we're doing pretty good.
There's another one here that I really like.
Okay.
So the whole book is called Contingency, Solidarity, and Irony, or Contingency, Irony, and Solidarity.
Yeah.
So maybe we should talk about irony next.
Yeah, irony might be the next. Once you realize that we're not dealing with objectivity, we're dealing with contingent beings using a contingent language. Oh, you know what? Right before we move on, because you had just mentioned the reframing thing.
Yeah.
So right before we move on, I do have this one other quote.
Okay.
And it's kind of we can put two quotes into one.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
The process of coming to know oneself is the process of inventing a new language, not discovering a previously unknown true self. And then redescription is not just a literary technique, it is also the chief instrument of moral and political progress. So this talks about how coming up with better stories not only affects you personally and you becoming the person that you want to be and not being stuck as like, well, I'm intrinsically like this.
Yeah.
Right. Which is like a huge thing. And we all know if you've ever done any personal growth, you'll know that this kind of is the case. Like you have to tell yourself a better story. You have to become the person you want to be and not be tied down to the idea that you are stuck where you are.
Yes. And that's what I love about that quote, because I think it's inspiring. So many people use these terminologies like, oh, I'm trying to find myself. Or people go on these different adventures and spiritual journeys talking about, I'm going to find myself and figure out who I am.
Right.
What I think he's arguing here is that maybe we're not meant to find ourselves. Maybe we're just meant to
tell ourselves a better story.
Create ourselves.
Yeah.
And we can create ourselves with whatever narrative we want.
And it's powerful.
Yeah.
And think about just people you respect or maybe even just like somebody like a great actor that you respect or somebody that you want to kind of emulate. It's fine to emulate people that you admire and go, you know what? That's how I want to be. So I'm going to start becoming that person. And it's not fake to do that. You know, a lot of people get stuck in like, I'm just not like that. That's just not who I am. I'm like, you could be anybody you want to be. You know, become the version of yourself that you'd be proud of.
Yeah, I think if you have that perspective, it's what he's saying here can be inspiring because it's empowering to think, I do have control over who I am. I mean, that's a whole other debate is like, do we control our choices or are choices just
We could go off on 2 hours. Trust me, I've got a lot of views on that too.
But if you believe that you can change if you make the conscious choice to, and you can decide who you want to be and create your own identity, then that feels empowering for sure.
And I'll tell you right now, regardless of whether you believe in free will or not, Christopher Hitchens had a quote. He was like, of course we have free will. We have no choice.
I love that. Yeah.
and also Rorty is talking about the ironist.
Yes.
These things are ironic. Even you know what? Even if I don't think free will exists in the way that it's kind of commonly thought of, that doesn't stop me from doing stuff. You know what I'm saying? I'm still gonna keep. It's like free will doesn't exist. Anyways, I got to do the dishes.
Yeah, you have to function in life as if you have free will.
Right.
You can't.
There's no other way.
You can't just sit around and do nothing because you feel like, well, I'm not in control of my thoughts, so I'll just sit here. And
I know.
And that's not going to lead to any happiness or fulfillment. And so you have to at least operate as if.
Right.
You.
And even if you don't think that that's the case, and that there's the irony in it, I feel like we run into a lot of stuff like that. Not just about free will, but all sorts of stuff, you know, like where we're just kind of like, well, I know it doesn't seem like that, but I'm going to keep doing it anyways, you know? I've actually started writing like an entire kind of like concept album about like the myth of Sisyphus rolling the ball up the hill all the time.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. I have like this whole, I ended up starting on another album, but I still have it all. I still have all the music for it. And one day I'm going to put it together. And it's one of those things where you kind of just, you go, okay, it seems like we're just rolling the ball up the hill, and then it kind of just rolls back down at the end of the day. And then you just kind of get back up and roll it up the hill again. And Camus was basically, you know, the absurdist philosopher was basically like, his whole thing was one must imagine Sisyphus happy. You know, the joy is not in getting the ball to the top of the hill and it's staying there. The joy is rolling the ball up the hill. And it's kind of ironic that's what it is, but we still shake our fists at the God anyways.
Yeah.
in defiance.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you have to be able to figure out a way to find joy in what you're doing, even if it does feel like it doesn't matter. Like
right,
even if you feel like what you do doesn't matter because we're not even in control of our choices, you still have to find a way to enjoy life.
right. It's absurd.
Yeah.
I feel like the Rorty's ironist is a just like the absurdist is kind of like after the existentialist.
Yeah.
It's like existentialist, absurdism, ironism,
Hmm.
and where you kind of go, okay, well, we're kind of past just like the there's no meaning, but I guess we'll just keep going anyways. It's like Rorty's like, what do you mean we'll guess? You do it anyways because it's awesome. It's
Yeah.
like a much more
Yeah.
positive
Yeah.
outlook,
I think
you
so.
know?
Yeah. I definitely feel that it's a little less bleak.
It is.
It's just
You don't you think about like when people like mention nihilism.
it's yeah.
You're just like, oh, because Nietzsche was like, oh man, it's terrible that we lost all of the God's dead. And, people think that Nietzsche was like, God's dead and I love it. It's great. And Nietzsche was like, no, this is terrible. What are we going to do now that God's dead and man's in control? Um, but that was a response to, religion of theistic uh, your meaning comes from God. And then Nietzsche goes, oh, God, if there's no God, then there's no meaning. And it's like existentialists were like, you can make your own.
You can create your own
You can make your
meaning.
own.
Yeah. And
But maybe there's still a God.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And I feel like the ironist is sort of more you can create your own meaning absolutely
Mhm.
and enjoy the freedom to not be stuck by this notion of objectivity and that there's a sense of freedom that comes if you feel like you can be anything you want to be,
Mhm.
and I feel like it's very easy to feel stuck in your own self-limiting beliefs, but once you realize that, okay, these are self-limiting beliefs, why do I feel like I'm a victim of circumstance? Why do I feel like, oh, I could never be that person?
Right.
Maybe that's because you're telling yourself
Yep.
you can never be that
Yeah,
person.
you're stuck. You're like, I'm objectively like this.
Yeah.
As opposed to being like, I can tell myself a new story tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right? Because
Yeah.
because we're making it up as we go along.
Yeah.
Which is really like the beauty of it.
Uh-huh.
Rorty, one time there's an interview he had. He's probably said it in a book, but he was like, so much of human history, life was so bad.
Mhm.
Just hundreds of thousands of years of just like dying from your teeth going and just like all this, just so bad that we always felt that we had to look somewhere else. Always to platonic forms or God, or we were always trying to reach outside of our human experience and be like, well, this sucks, but whatever's really going on, it's got to be way better. And I think we've kind of moved past that. And we've started to collectively, just like this redescription is the chief instrument of moral and political progress.
Mhm.
We've told ourselves better stories and we've improved our life through pragmatism, through science and technology. And you and I are sitting here, in a room full of crazy electronic equipment and we're doing all sorts of stuff. Now that if you brought it back even 50 years ago, people would be like,
Right.
and life has gotten better for more people as time goes on. So now we don't have the same kind of like he was basically saying like we don't have to reach outside of our experience anymore. We can sit in our experience
Mhm.
and realize that, oh, you know what? Like this is what it is. This experience is what it is. Like we might as well do what we can with it. We might as well make the best experience we can.
Make the most of it.
Make
Yeah.
the most of it. And not only that, but like try to make it better for the generations ahead of us. Like
Mhm.
how do we leave it? Like this is now where we kind of it's like the human experiment,
Yeah.
and we're all part of it. And we're just trying to like, yeah, keep it going,
Right.
So it is very interesting. And obviously the reframing has been like a huge thing. It's been huge for me too. It has been, and I was doing reframing before I even knew it was called reframing, right? I always thought like how do I increase my empathy? I was really into like Eastern philosophy when I was young.
Oh yeah, me too.
In fact, I wonder. I feel like I had that book. I have The Way of the Peaceful Warrior sitting around here
Oh, I
somewhere.
love that.
Um,
I'm that's definitely speaking my language because
I swear to God, I have just like a book sitting around, and it's
I
sitting around
believe
somewhere.
you.
Oh, it's I think I brought it out there, but yeah.
Okay.
Um, but like, I got a hold of that book in 5th grade,
Okay.
and then by the time I was like in high school and stuff, I was like knee deep in it. I was like, this is awesome. Like
Yeah.
this is really like, I feel like I'm tapping into something
Uh-huh.
here that seems really like it it's but once again, it's a story and it just feels right. It's a story that when you hear it and you go, oh, and then all of a sudden like little things go,
Makes sense.
that really makes sense. And it's all these little parables,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Um and there was one in there that about a riverboat captain or fisherman or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And he's on his boat and he's like doing his thing, he's working. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, like this boat comes careening through the water and hits his boat.
Yeah.
And he gets so upset. He's like, "Oh, you idiot! What's wrong with you?" Blah 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 blah. And he like runs over there and he's about to give this guy like, and then he sees that the boat had just escaped, like it just got become untied.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, his anger disappeared, right? Because there was no the same kind of agency behind it. You didn't have the same feeling of intent or incompetence
Mm-hmm.
that maybe caused this. He just went over and was like, crap, that's like got the boat, pushed it out of the way, and blah blah blah. That was a instant reframing of the situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the way he had looked at it first was filled with anger. Oh, I'm going to give that guy a piece of my mind. And the kind of moral of the story was like, you should kind of treat people like that.
Yes, treat people like the way you would treat the boat, as if they might not necessarily have the intention of doing something you don't agree with. They might not have the malintentions,
Right. What is
right?
the quote? Never attribute to malice what you can attribute to incompetence.
Oh, I like that. Never attribute malice what you can attribute to incompetence. Yeah, it's possible sometimes people are just doing the best they can with what limited knowledge they have.
And still careen a boat into yours.
Yeah, and they don't mean to do it. So is it fair? Is it fair to get angry at someone? Is it fair to like get revenge? Is it fair to treat them poorly
Yeah.
because they didn't know any better?
Right. And then you kind of have to start to think and start to take it even deeper and be like, if somebody is psychologically messed up enough to do something so evil that it's like, you have to almost treat them like an empty boat
Mm-hmm.
because something caused that.
Yeah.
That was not just some like, I am making a free choice and they were not born that way. They were made that way. Like this is something that like, well, maybe they were born that way, but it could be some kind of like, imagine like somebody does something like careens their car into a crowd of people and you're going, oh my God, what kind of lunatic, this is terrible. And then you find out that they had some kind of like brain tumor
Uh-huh.
that caused them to hallucinate and blah, blah. You wouldn't be angry at them anymore like you would be before.
Right. Yeah, that's a great analogy.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's kind of the same thing. Or like we don't do it with animals. Like if a bear were to go like maul people in a Walmart or something like that,
Yeah.
you wouldn't be like, what an evil bear.
Right. I think of an example of, I experience this all the time in traffic where somebody is like whizzing past me and people are like honking their horns and getting mad or whatever. Or I'll even like look at someone and they're like, oh, how could that person just speed past me? But what if, their loved one is in the hospital and they're trying to rush to the hospital to
Right. And it's
spend their
perfect
last.
because what did you do? You told a story.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, like
Yeah.
you said, you know what? I'm going to tell a different story right now.
Yeah.
And that's like, it's so powerful.
It's that reframing
Yep.
of how you're perceiving someone's intention, someone's reason for doing what they do. you can't read someone's mind. So it's never fair to assume the worst in people because you never know what someone is going through.
Yep.
Like if someone is rude to you, you never know what they're going through.
I know. Yeah. I always say, like tipping, like,
I've had many serving jobs. Please tip your waiters.
we're both artists, so we have both had many serving jobs.
Yes, I'm sure. Yeah.
I've worked almost every position in a restaurant possible.
Really?
Oh my God. Growing up and just like, I mean, I was bussing tables at 14, waiting tables at 16. And I always say, if I'm out, none of my friends would do this, but if say I was out like, and the service was kind of bad and you could just kind of tell like they're rushing around, like kind of waiting to get your drinks, I tip more.
Oh, really?
I tip more.
That's so interesting.
Because I go, you know what? Chances are is that they're having a bad day. Something's not going right. Some other table is maybe running them more so they can't do it. I always assume the best. Now, am I going to give some money to some people who are just being lazy assholes? Yes, but I would rather err on the side that it's not.
Yeah, because I mean, what if they're not just lazy assholes? You know, and even if they are lazy assholes, do they deserve the money?
Even then, that might even change their thing. They might go, why would they tip me like this?
Maybe that would motivate them like, oh, maybe I should actually earn this.
I know.
Work for this money. You know?
Yeah, and in a way, you've kind of like inserted a different story because maybe they have like this view of like, oh, customer always wants stuff, blah blah blah, and then you're there and you treat them well still, and then you tip them well, and then they start to go, oh, that's not what I expected. That's not my normal tip there. So like those little things can like change. They can change everything like in the moment, and it also changes it for you.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to walk away going, "Fuck, service sucked. I gave him $1 because fuck them." I mean, flip them. We'll edit it out. And so yeah, once again, it's for you as much as it is for them.
Yeah. Yeah, going back to this idea of how storytelling is now teaching us more about ethics and morals than back in the day when it was the church and philosophers. I can relate to this a lot on a personal level just because I'm a professional storyteller. I'm a filmmaker. Right. I'm a writer. I'm an actor. And it was interesting. I had a conversation with someone years ago, and they were asking me, like, well, why do you want to pursue a filmmaking career? And I was like, well, I understand how movies can impact lives in a really positive and meaningful way because films have impacted my life in a positive and meaningful way. So I want to tell stories that help touch lives in a positive way. And I remember this guy who was like, I'm just doing this for fun. Like, it's just, I'm like, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But he was also,
it takes all kinds.
Yeah. Yeah. He was also arguing that, like, I think he would disagree that how impactful film, literature, art, he's somebody who would probably disagree how impactful it actually is.
Right.
But I feel like until you experience it for yourself, you're not going to understand. Like, for instance, you're a musician. Mm-hmm. I can't tell you how much music has been like therapeutic for me when I'm grieving and I listen to a song, or if I'm experiencing any type of emotion and I don't have the words to really express how I feel and I feel like alone and isolated in those feelings, if I listen to a song and the lyrics articulate exactly how I feel,
it's solidarity.
Yes.
It's solidarity.
It makes me feel like, oh, I'm not alone. Like someone else understands. And
man, if I put on an Elliott Smith record, I'm zoned in and I'm sitting there going, man, it's not just me.
Yeah.
And there's so much beauty in that. We are social creatures.
Yeah.
As much as, libertarians want to act like we're not. No, I mean, as much as like people like want to act like an island, we are social creatures, and that stuff, having moments of solidarity, even if it's through getting somebody's music and listening to it. They might as well be in the room with you talking to you. They just put it down in a way that they can deliver it to your house and you can listen to it there. But music wasn't always like that too, right? Before anything to record with,
right?
You'd go but then also, it's the same thing with theater. This was a place to gather and collectively share the story. And it kind of sucks that we've like lost a lot of that.
Yeah.
Even the movie theater isn't what it used to be.
No, it's not. I mean, it still exists, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, buying out, you can still buy an album, but most people aren't. Most people are just streaming it. So it is a brave new world in those respects, as far as, but I don't know if it's any more radical than having to go see the musician live, to being like, oh, now we have a recording. Oh, that takes it all away. It's like, radio is the truest form of communication, and it's like, what is this TV crap? It seems so like we get blindsided. Like everything's different now. All the stuff, all the nostalgia that I loved about going. I saw, like, for instance, Batman in 1989. Okay. I was 8 years old. And I remember walking in that movie theater. It was 1989, which is so long ago now. I'm super old. But I still remember walking in there, loved comic books already, right? And the 90s were about to explode into comic books.
Yeah.
And I go in there and I remember seeing like the Batman cardboard cutouts, and it's just this energy, and I go in and I see it. I'm like, and it's a Tim Burton film. It's great. It's like an awesome, it's a great movie. It's got Jack Nicholson and Michael Keaton in it. It's fantastic. It's like such an experience. I'm proud that I got to see that. And it's not like that these days. It's not really the same. You still have some movies, people are like, oh man, and the Marvel movies had their time and stuff, but there was something about like, there was no getting this at home.
Yeah.
It was, there was no way to like, this wasn't going to come out on a streaming service in a few weeks. This was like, you had to go see it in the theater.
Yeah. And I really have this fear that live theater will become a dying art form. And that's why I'm very supportive of live theater, because, theater is storytelling. Stories used to be passed on orally and acted out. And, back in Greek and Roman times, there was theater. I feel like there's something very different about being in the physical presence of someone performing live in the moment. There's a different energy exchange. There's a different communitas, so to speak. There's a different feeling, a different vibe. Being in person and watching real people perform this story in real life in the moment.
I agree.
Very, very different than watching a recording.
Yep. Even if it's the best show of recorded stuff, it's still different. We want perfect example. Records.
Yeah.
Right? The 90s, like records, and then all of a sudden, records was like the only medium to listen to stuff for decades.
Yeah.
And then it was like 8-track.
Yeah.
Cassette tapes.
Yeah.
CDs. And then everybody was like, records are dead. And that was it.
Not in I still listen to records.
I have a whole slew of records out there and a pretty nice system and the whole thing. And in the 90s, all I had was CDs because nobody was making records of anything. And you just considered that it was gone. You're like, it's just gone. We're not going to move backwards. And then it turns out that we really do want to listen to the records. We love the little pops and clicks and stuff that happen, and we love the realness of the analog sound of it. And
it sounds different. It sounds different than a CD.
And then in the 2010s, for the first time since like the 80s, vinyl outsold CDs. And so maybe like theater, sometimes you have to like move far enough away from something to realize like, oh, you know what? That was better.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not like I think theater is necessarily better than film. I mean, there's so much that I love about film. I just love both. I don't want either one to go away.
Right. Well, it's
You
just,
know?
but it's just a different experience. It's
Yeah.
like saying like, like I obviously don't want like live music to go away either.
Yeah.
And I don't think it will.
Yeah.
And I do think the same thing. I think you're going to have a lot of people. I think you have a lot of advocates for
Mhm.
live performance that are going to keep it cool.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a dying art. I just have this fear the way technology and AI and all of this is developing. It is kind of a paranoia. I feel like, oh no, I hope theater doesn't become a dying art. But
Right. I agree.
I really don't think it. I think it's unlikely that it will.
Yeah, I think so too. And Atlanta's been pretty cool about having some places to like continue. I mean, like Dad's Garage and stuff like that, like popping up, like doing what they like everything.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of great theater
Yeah.
just around Atlanta where we live.
And just making it cool. Like making it like
Yeah.
something that is just like, oh man, let's go over there. This is gonna be great.
Mhm.
It's cool again.
Well, to me, I feel like you're watching a whole separate reality. And if you're an actor and you're really dedicated to the art form, it does become real. It's not just fake. You're watching real people experience a real event together. And if you're a dedicated artist, you make it authentic. You're not just faking it, right?
Right.
So,
And obviously the best actors and stuff are just the most convincing.
yeah, well, because they know how to create
Yeah.
their truth. They know how to create a real, truthful experience.
Yeah, and in a way, truth is like when we were talking about earlier, but like truth is like what you're the most convinced of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? So like that's your truth. Like you can't like be convinced of something and then like choose to not be.
I mean, I guess you could try. But
You could try, but if you're like
I've never tried it.
if you're like literally convinced of something,
Yeah.
I'm totally convinced.
yeah.
And then you go, but I will now choose to not believe that. It's like, okay, I mean you could say it and you could act like it or whatever, but
Well, I don't know though. I feel like in a way that's what performing artists do if they're telling a story. Like I might be convinced that my name is Kimberly, right?
Well, yeah.
I might be convinced that I'm a nice person, right? I
Yeah.
do. I do most of my life, in my daily life. I've convinced myself that I'm nice and kind and I would never intentionally hurt someone. This is a narrative I've told myself.
Mhm.
But if I have to play a character who isn't nice, I have to convince myself that I'm not nice. And the way that I do that is I get behind my reason why. I have to understand why I'm not
Mhm.
I have to justify my reason for not being nice.
Right.
I have to find a justification for it.
Which is kind of empathy in action.
Yes.
Yeah.
But and as an actor, that does help me feel more empathetic towards people who behave differently than I do in
Mhm.
daily life, towards people who are perceived as unkind or uncaring. I have more empathy for them.
It's almost like the biggest expression of empathy you can do is to like literally put yourself in the shoes.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's one way of looking at it. This is another great quote about solidarity that I really enjoyed of Rorty's. He says, solidarity is not discovered by reflection, but created. So I think that kind of relates to what we were just saying.
Mhm.
Empathy is built by storytelling,
Yep.
Not by abstract reasoning.
Yeah, I actually have that quote also because I think that I think it is also, this is probably one of the most important points that he talks about in the entire thing, because this has to do by like it's kind of this meta view, because he's like, our experience isn't a reflection of reality. It's not. We're not looking right at reality. we're stuck at our interpretation, and that's fine, and we're okay with that. In fact, it's almost more special that way that we have our own personal stuff going on. And I immediately thought of the solidarity created in the early American labor movement and the folk music that went along with it. This wasn't some authoritarian, like, oh, everybody get together. But this was people coming together and being like, hey, check out these cool songs but that's getting the message I want. And it would bring people together, and they'd listen to these stories about which side are you on, about the coal miners and all this kind of stuff. Now you go, and you might not be a coal miner, but you hear this song and you go, oh, is that what's going on over there? And then you're like, I can relate to that. I've been screwed over by a boss before. Like you start to, it gives you that empathy. And so the labor movement, they didn't need a philosopher to come and go, well, you see, solidarity is when people come together. I don't know why his accent would be like that, but they needed musicians. They needed artists. They needed the people telling the story. It would have never been the same with just some philosopher being like, God's dead, and blah, blah. It's stuffy. It's not the same. It doesn't bring people together in the same kind of way. And I wrote, the songs didn't persuade people by being correct in any way. They persuaded people by making them feel like they belonged to each other.
That's beautiful.
Not because of some universal truth, but because we all came together. And that's. Is there anything more joyous, than a community coming together? Holy crap. That's like, it's hard for me to think of anything that's more, even being together for like, a parade of like, we were talking about Atlanta having like boroughs and stuff. When my little boroughs have parades and stuff, man, I'm so like excited. Yeah. I'm just happy for my people.
Yeah.
It's just nice. Or like if, it's like the local sports team wins. I'm not even really into sports. But I couldn't be happier when they win because my people are happy. Yeah.
Sports can bring people together.
Yeah,
and divide people.
Yeah, truly. But you like to see the solidarity. The solidarity feels good when you all come together, and especially think about like your friends of actors. When you all get together and like accomplish stuff and do stuff together and working together, it's just like the best feeling.
It really is. Yeah, it really is, because you're all working together towards a common goal. And if you're telling a narrative together through theater, through film, through music, that you're impacting the audience in a way that will hopefully maybe raise their awareness or just bring joy, make them laugh.
Right.
Like music, even if it's not like super deep or profound, if music, the vibration, the sound, it can change my mood.
Oh my God.
If it just,
completely turn it around.
Fun.
And think about like being at a concert.
Yeah.
And like everything's so loud, you can't even hear anybody or whatever, and you're just dancing. And then you look over and like lock eyes with somebody that you've never seen and will never see again, and you lock eyes and you're just both like this.
It's like this unspoken. I feel like music is its own language in itself. It's like a language.
It's like an amalgamation of a lot of different languages.
Yeah.
Just music alone and being able to manipulate sound is obviously, it's crazy that something that doesn't have like, it's not really a dialect, can make you feel a certain way. Like you listen to like Beethoven, you dun, 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 Moonlight Sonata or something, you're going, this is breathtaking. And I don't even know why.
I also think it's interesting how different people have different musical tastes, and different people respond to music in different ways.
Sure.
And I do wonder if the reason why I like certain music more than others is if that resonates with me on a vibrational level. I think like as human beings, everything can be looked at through the lens of vibration and frequency.
Sure.
You could examine everything through frequency and vibration. So to me, it makes sense. Okay, if I like this song, maybe that's because I'm actually vibrating because of my thoughts and my emotions. Maybe I'm vibrating in the same frequency as the song, and that's why I enjoy it.
Right.
Whereas a different type of music where I'm not necessarily naturally, you know what I want.
No, I completely agree. It's like, well, like some people like maybe like really into EDM or something.
Yeah.
And they go there and they just hear the bass, boom, 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 and something about it just makes them go, oh man, this is exactly what I want.
Yeah.
And then some people go to like get the same feeling at like a bluegrass show.
Yeah.
And they're like, wow, those vibrations are the ones I want to hear. Those are the ones that are speaking to me. We can't
Opera.
Yeah, we can't think of every variable that led to that, and we don't need to.
Mm-hmm.
It's not worth. Once again, it's not worth it's not worth knowing, or even if we could know the truth behind it.
Mm-hmm. The reason, or yeah,
It's not even that important.
Yeah.
To know the reason. Like it the feeling that you get that's the important bit.
Mm-hmm.
That's the pulp.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other stuff is like, well, let me think about this. And not that listen, I don't want to like, say that like somebody who's really analytical and wants to do that kind of stuff, to them, that's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
To them, you find some singers that are like, get up there and they're like very like sexual, or they're like passionate and they do this thing. And then you have some people who are just like, they just sing and they're like, but they're all great in their own way. But it's like, that person's obviously not feeling it the same exact way, even though the music may be, but maybe more cerebral or something, and they go, it's like people who like Rush, right? Rush isn't like the band you go to for like emotional, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, but you can go, oh, the drums are so good, and and it's a completely different vibe, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's mostly men at those shows. So they admit it in their documentary. And that kind of leads me into this thing that Rorty, believe that the progress came through changing the story and not appealing to truth.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was thinking about like the narrative of like the early labor movement, because it was such a musical movement.
Mm-hmm.
They changed the narrative from lazy, the narrative from like the business owners and the capitalists, the owners of the coal mines were like, you guys are lazy. These are lazy workers, and then they came through and they were like, no. We're the backbone of America. They reframed what was going on through the music, and they go, no, we're the ones making it happen, and we're here and we're strong. Come with us. And everybody goes, you know what? We do work our asses off, and we are the backbone of this whole thing. And it wasn't about like, equations or what philosopher said this or that. It was about like, they told a better story.
Mm-hmm. Their music.
Yeah. They told a better story, and that was it.
Yeah, and I mean that really supports Rorty's point here about solidarity, and narrative shapes our solidarity. We create solidarity through narrative.
Mm-hmm. And
stories.
And that the solidarity is the important part. That's like the part we're trying to get to more and more by being more inclusive, to say. There's something that a lot of people always say. They always go, well, it's just human nature, right?
Right.
People say that.
Yeah.
We can't do this because human nature won't let us. I'm sorry, but we have human nature is a constantly evolving thing.
Exactly.
It is not static.
Yeah.
We make moral progress as time goes on. We're constantly redefining what it means to be human. Mm-hmm. And in a way, saying, well, human nature is like this, just implies that if somebody doesn't act that way, that they're somehow not human. You know what I'm saying? Like, they don't say it, but it kind of implies that.
No, you're othering.
You're othering.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, you're saying, well, human nature doesn't allow us to do this, but somebody's doing it over there. Well, screw them. There's no solidarity in that. It's like too open, too vague.
Yeah.
But if you can tell a story about, say, a struggling single, parent or something, now that's something real. Look at like what was it, Will Smith in The Pursuit of Happiness? It's like an uplifting, he's there making it. And whether you've been in that situation or not, it puts you there,
Yeah.
and you're going, oh man, that's the kind of solidarity you want to feel. Because maybe next time you run into somebody like that, you're going, oh, that's not a bum. That's like somebody who's trying to like just do the best they can for what, it just, it once again increases that empathy and makes things more inclusive. Whereas like trying to make it too big and trying to just things that divide basically. And we're obviously dealing with that climate pretty heavily right now in today's.
It's really hard to create art that isn't going to be somewhat divisive when there's so many people that have very strong opinions one way or the other that are opposing. And it's hard as an artist, how do we make movies that aren't going to offend? How do we make movies that are going to cultivate more unity and less division? How do we write songs that are going to cultivate more solidarity? It's hard to navigate that just because there's so many opposing views. So it's tough. I don't have the answer to that question.
I think it's just kind of the birthing pains of being in settling into the fact that we are kind of ironists, that we don't have a final language, and that we've been searching for a long time, and we still can't just come to. I think we always kind of drudged along like someday we would just be like, and this is it. We found it. We can now all agree. But we're realizing more and more, and especially with the onset of just like the mountain of information that gets moved through the internet every day.
And how do you tell the difference between information and misinformation? How do you know? What sources do you trust? What do you not
right,
trust?
and these
how
are
do you navigate
these are the growing pains, right? And just like with any technology or something like that. But this one is particularly. I mean, this era is going to go down as a very, the onset of computers, basically, right? For the past, 30, 40 years, like within our lives, and it's going to go down like 1,000 years from now. They're going to look back and be like, before then, we didn't even have any technology that would be knowable. You know what I'm saying? I'm talking about like pre-internet stuff. So I do try to keep an optimistic outlook and think that while we will go through some growing pains, that through art and through these things, we will end up forming the right sentences to tell the story with, to bring people together, to like, we've already done a good job, even with some setbacks throughout the centuries.
Yeah.
Of making some progress.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you take a step back and then get it going. It's like if you're arm wrestling and you let them win a little bit, right. Then you let them go down.
It's not like a perfect steady climb. It's more like a wave.
Yeah, it's more of a wave.
A wave, and then Yeah,
you need a median line like going up it, but the real line's kind of going like this. So it's gonna be interesting to see. But I think that's what makes it even more important for people like you and I to keep doing what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I hope you're right. I mean, I have some concerns about the singularity, not solidarity, but this idea of the singularity merging with technology. I see how that can be a good thing and a dangerous thing. So I hope you're right. I hope.
I like to think I am.
But one thing you said earlier, I just thought it was funny. I had to touch on it. You said people often say things like, "Oh, that's just human nature." I feel like that's kind of an excuse for not making an effort to be better. I feel like people use like, "Oh, I'm only human." I actually hear that more like, "Oh, I'm only human," as an excuse for destructive behavior, unhealthy behavior.
It's just like what we were talking about earlier. It applies on a large scale. Like all these things apply like on a large narrative, like as far as like a population of people and to ourselves. So like, if you go, just human nature will never be able to have that socialist utopia that I've always wanted because people are just too greedy.
Yeah.
Humans are just too greedy, and that's just what it is. And it's just like you going, I mean, how many times have you heard somebody who like constantly messes up? It's like, I guess I'm just an idiot or something, you know? And it's like, no. I mean, you've done some dumb stuff. I will admit that. Yes, absolutely. But, you know, we're here for you, and like we're going to all get through this together.
You don't have to keep doing stuff.
You don't have
to define yourself by your past.
Yeah, you don't have to keep telling that same story.
Yeah, you can change the story.
And you know what? And I've never been religious, but I do take religion seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And that is probably I've done a lot of, strangely enough, I've never ever been, I mean, I'm an atheist. I'll throw it out there. I don't care. Everybody knows it. Everybody knows. My parents already know. So
hey, I gotta go. I'm just kidding.
But I always have been.
Yeah.
So it's not like I
always, even like childhood, like even from when you were 5, 6, 7, like.
Yeah, in any kind of meaningful way. I mean, I remember people talking about it.
So did your parents? Now I'm really curious. Did your parents?
I know it's a strange case.
No, it's not strange at all. Most people I know are atheists.
No, I'm saying it's strange to have always been.
Yes, to have always been.
Yeah.
Did your parents ever try to instill a religion?
No, but they made kind of, my parents were both on, when I was young, were both on a spiritual journey to find what they kind of were into.
So they were trying to figure it out.
Yeah, and I had access to, I had nothing pushed on me, and I had access to a lot of literature about different religions.
Yeah.
So I just kind of had like I just started, and funny, I always tell the story. It's like the first thing I got into was like Greek and Roman mythology. I was just like, this is awesome. You know, I was like, you know, even from like, you know, just every story and everything. I had like books with like cassette tapes that would play along with them when I was like young.
Yeah.
And then the first time, like, and then of course I had friends who, I grew up in the South. I grew up in Atlanta. So I had friends who went to church. And I remember the first time I went to church with one of my friends, and we're like in Sunday school because we're like little. Mm-hmm. And they go there, they tell the stories. I was like, oh yeah, man, this is just like all stories I'd be talking about, you know, all this stuff. And then at one point I go, oh, I think they really believe this. You know, it was weird for me because I was like, what? What's going on?
You were like, wait, this isn't just like theater? Like, do people believe this?
I thought we were just telling cool stories about superheroes, you know, like I thought.
Wait, people think he really walked on water? What?
Yeah, and I would say for a long time, maybe into like through my teens and stuff, I wasn't like, I had plenty of, like, my best friend was Christian and stuff. So it wasn't like, didn't hate anybody for being Christian, but I was probably more negative about it. I probably kind of just like made jokes about it more and stuff, or maybe implied that somebody was maybe dumb or stupid. You know, probably more than I should have.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way. I wasn't mean about it, but yeah, I'll say some stuff occasionally that was like, oh, nobody believes that crap, you know, kind of whatever.
Yeah.
And then when I got older, I just started taking it more serious. I heard somebody say, they're like, you can either take the Bible literally or you can take it seriously.
Oh, okay. That's interesting you say that. I usually think of it like, okay, you can interpret the Bible literally or metaphorically. Like,
yeah, but the seriously puts a whole new weight on it.
Seriously is like literally or seriously. But wouldn't you be taking it seriously if you took it literally?
They're saying you can't. That's what their whole point was. It's like if you take it literally, then you're not taking it seriously.
I got you. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I get it.
Because there's so much more depth than the literal story.
Yeah,
there's
metaphors.
Right.
Yes.
There's so much. And so what did I do? I started studying the Bible as the atheist who decided to
take it
seriously. Well, my view was this, and this ties into the whole thing. Mm-hmm. My view is that it is the most influential book of all time. So why wouldn't I? You know what I'm saying? Like, whether I believe it for real or not, why wouldn't I take it seriously?
Yeah, that's a great outlook to have, to at least read it, to at least give it a chance, to at least try to understand, okay, what are the lessons in here that I could apply in my
Sure.
practical life?
Because I had already been doing that with other religions,
Yeah.
and because I had kind of just written off. Now, I did grow up in the South around some strange evangelical kind of, your typical, what a lot of like people would be like, hypocritical Christians, that, the ones that give it a bad name, or who honestly haven't usually even read the Bible. And that's okay. They're working through their own stuff too, and they grew up the way they did. They were told their stories. They listened to whoever they listened to, and that's the story they're living. But I do implore them to take it more seriously than that. And so while I don't believe in any of the dogma surrounding, original sin or or Jesus dying on the cross, or I now don't even think that it's a whole other topic, but I got really into messianic prophecy.
Oh, wow.
Which is very interesting.
That is interesting.
So I'm almost like an expert on it now, of like the messianic prophecy of the Old Testament, of Tanakh.
Okay.
I call it, that's how far into it I am. I call it Tanakh, which is like the the word for the entire book, not just the Torah, not just the first 5 books.
Yeah.
So I got really into messianic prophecy, and I started being like, well, I always thought that maybe they just didn't accept Jesus as the Messiah or whatever, but he kind of did fulfill it. And then I went back and I was like, I don't actually think he fulfilled any of the messianic prophecy, which is like a whole other thing. But it's fine for me because there's no weight in it for me.
Yeah.
But I still think it's very interesting. And I think that whether or not he fulfilled it or not, it doesn't matter, because he was still an ethical genius.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have to believe all the other stuff to know about. These are my big takeaway. These are the things I take away from Christianity. And in my opinion, if these aren't the things you're really focusing on, you're missing a lot of the main points of it. Spiritual rebirth, which is literally what we're talking about, which is like whoever you were yesterday or even today, you can shed that and become somebody new tomorrow. Man, you can't have more of a resurrection, spiritual rebirth, the turning away, turning back to God. These are all that same thing. Like, I know you've been doing this forever. I know you've been telling yourself this story forever. What I'm here to tell you is that you can start new today.
Yeah.
It's so powerful.
Yeah.
It's so powerful. It is.
It's a great message. It's inspiring.
It really is.
You can reinvent yourself tomorrow. You can reinvent yourself right now.
Yep.
Just choose a different path. Make a different choice.
So that's number one with Christianity. I love that about Christianity.
Yeah.
It's like the big thing, right? And then and often, people talk about it, but an often overlooked thing is spirit of the law. Jesus was really big about spirit of the law. And he said, and part of his thing was like, you guys are following the law to like the letter of the law. Mm-hmm. But you're kind of like doing it so you can like get away with stuff, even though you're technically following. You know what I'm saying? So it's a way to kind of it's a way to like to say, hey, don't just skate by like doing the least amount possible. Like, think about things. Like, think about the reasons for things and go above and beyond it when you can. In a way, like Jesus was more radical about the law than anybody else before him. He was like, no, I'm going beyond the law. I'm taking the spirit of the law and I'm going to go beyond it. And so I think that's important when you run into any kind of thing that you like, any kind of long lasting rules that we have as a society or as a culture or whatever, and you go, well, what are the reasons? You can kind of look into it and be like, oh, okay, I see like the big meta narrative of this. And so now you can start to apply it to different things that maybe it didn't apply to before. So I think that's a very interesting thing about Christianity too. But the rebirth, the spiritual rebirth is probably the biggest one. And Jesus spoke in parables was his whole thing. Right? Yeah. That was like his whole...
It was all storytelling.
Yep.
I'm going to teach you these lessons through the art of storytelling. Like, instead of just saying, don't kill somebody. I'm going to tell you a story about what happened to someone. And it's a lot easier to learn through a story versus someone just telling you don't do something or
Right.
do this
Because
thing.
what's that? That's just the facts.
Yeah.
But what have we been talking about? Like, what's more important than the facts? The facts don't change hearts,
Yeah.
but the stories do.
Yeah.
The stories put you there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that is interesting. I never even thought about tying Christianity back into this, the ironist kind of, retelling the story, but it really is like the whole, like using parables and the whole idea about rebirth and resurrection and stuff like that.
Yeah. It definitely relates for sure.
Yeah. Very
I
interesting.
feel like we could talk about religion, Christianity on a whole other.
We'll have to have a Christianity podcast one day.
But
I love it. I'm a huge fan of it. Yeah. I'm a huge fan of
I honestly, I love learning about every religion out there. And I take bits and pieces from, I think every religion has something valuable to say. Um, and also, if you were to examine most widely accepted religions,
Mhm.
the underlying principles are essentially the same. It's the stories themselves that are different. It's the narratives, it's the characters in the stories and what they go through, but the actual underlying values and principles are very, very similar. There's a
Mhm.
lot more similarities in the principles and the values.
Right. If you get caught up in all the little details,
Yeah.
that's kind of almost like I hate to say it, but it's like, well, the fan fiction isn't canon. You know, like
Yeah.
let's get back to the canon here. This is like the real main points, and then all
Yeah.
the other like little stories we don't have to take those as seriously. They can be useful.
Yeah.
But you do find common ground among all these things, and that's kind of how my mom is.
Yeah.
My dad's a many paths kind of guy, and
Yeah.
but he's definitely Christian. My mom's totally down with Jesus, but she's totally down with like all sorts of other stuff too.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of like when you get that sense of just being like, I'm just spiritual, like that's kind of how, and I think that's fine for people because what it does is it opens you up to be like a story collector.
Yeah, and what I was going to say is I think that it's beautiful to have so many different stories to explain values and morals and ethics. Like I
Mm-hmm.
think it's beautiful because maybe the Jesus story really resonates with person A, but maybe the story of the Buddha resonates with person B.
100%.
And they're both beautiful stories. They're just illustrating morals and ethics in a different narrative. But the
Mm-hmm.
morals and ethics are basically this very, very closely.
Oh yeah. Well, and the more you look into it, the more you start to see this stuff. It's just like we were able to let's talk about Christianity a little bit. Then all of a sudden it's like, wow, that ties directly into what we were just talking, because you find that these are all, I look at the way I look at religion, is it like a literary genre?
It
I mean,
can be, yeah.
I do kind of think of it like that. And
Yeah.
I think of these are musings on the human experience and human and kind of just like how we operate, ancient wisdom,
Mhm.
like things like that people noticed. They just go, you know what, I'm thinking about this for a while, and I kind of got some ideas about how this goes down. And by great writers.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously some of the poetry and even some of the not poetry, but a lot of the poetry of the Old Testament is just so gorgeous. Whether you
It's
believe
very poetic.
whether
Yeah.
you believe it in or not, just read through Isaiah.
Yeah.
It's killer. It's awesome. It's
Yeah.
it's great. And he told a good story,
Mhm.
and you want to talk about lasting. Wow.
Yeah.
Talk about a lasting story. That's why I take it so seriously too.
Yeah, because it's lasted so long
Mhm.
and it's still very relevant. And so I think any stories like that have stood the test of time, they're worth reading, they're worth examining, they're worth, talking about. So
Yeah.
this is another quote that I really liked. A talent for speaking differently rather than for arguing well is the chief instrument of cultural change.
Ooh, yes. Yeah, it's I think it has to do with an argument is something that is almost by its nature divisive.
Mm.
You
Well,
know,
it depends. Again, like it depends on how you're presenting the argument. Like I could present an argument for something in a respectful way,
100%.
or I could argue in a really disrespectful way.
Right. Right, but I think and I completely agree. And trust me, I'm an arguer. But in a respectful way. Like I
Yeah.
love arguing. I love arguing.
I like friendly debates,
Right, because we get into it, and then at the end of the day, you're like, all right, that was cool. We both learned some stuff, got some stuff, learned stuff about each other.
Yeah.
It's not just the argument at hand that you're learning about during all that. Um, but shaping read the first part again. What was the
A talent for speaking differently
Okay.
rather than for arguing well is the chief instrument for cultural change.
Right, speaking differently, which is from what I remember, he's talking about paradigm shifts.
Mm-hmm.
And there is I actually have a book. I'll have to let you borrow sometime, but it's so it's a book on it's basically a book on like the history of science, and it's actually where the term like paradigm shift came from.
Oh, okay.
Was this book.
Cool. Okay.
Because it talked about how it wasn't just facts, that it wasn't like science is this thing where it's like, and then this was all bad science, and then this was good science, and then we just kept going. Bad science would persist until like until a better story was told. Like the Earth was flat till it wasn't.
Most of science is theoretical. Much of science is just a theory.
Some would say all.
Yeah.
I
mean, that's true. Yeah, it's all theory.
Yeah, but an interesting thing is like a heliocentric versus geocentric universe. So obviously, now we look back and be like, geocentric, that's ridiculous. Because we know, because we're in the paradigm of heliocentric, and it fits the model so much better. Now, you and I, just sitting on this planet without access to the science, would look up and be like, this is probably the center. Mm-hmm. Because it feels like the center. Mm-hmm. It feels like without any of that knowledge, you don't even know what's going on, right? So there was a model for the stars that was geocentric, and they could use that model to travel from like England by boat and hit New York within 50 miles.
Okay.
By using the star charts that were a geocentric model.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So there was like technically it's like a good scientific reason.
Yeah.
For like, well, of course it's geocentric. Look how well it works.
Right.
Right? Yeah. It turns out later that we found better ways to do it, and we could get even closer. And that's kind of also how we knew it was better. Because it worked better. Because pragmatism.
Pragmatism.
So yeah, that's but that's like you're living in that paradigm, and then the paradigm doesn't just like, we don't just get facts. It's not like somebody, if you look at like Galileo or anybody who came along with like, even Einstein, you look at like Newton and you go, okay, Newton's theory of gravity, and that we were in that paradigm for so long, and it worked so well for so long, it got us to the moon.
Right.
Right? It still really works. And then Einstein came along and just twisted. He told it a little bit different, and the models got a little bit better. But it was, and now we're in a new paradigm, and we get to like work within that. So I think that basically like it's these narratives that cause like paradigm shifts, and we kind of go like kicking and screaming into them,
Yeah.
even if the facts kind of are like, you get like a group of scientists who have been believing one thing for so long, and some new kid comes along and goes, I think it's like this. They're going to go, wow.
Yeah. I mean, it can be hard to accept that your whole worldview has been wrong for most of your life. I mean, that can be a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
So it can be tough. So I get it. But I think it is important to keep an open mind. And I think that's probably why I'm more of an ironist than I realized before I read this book. It says here, ironists are never quite able to take themselves seriously because they are always aware that the terms in which they describe themselves are subject to change. So when I read that quote, I was like, oh my gosh.
I would like to let you know that I'm literally on that quote in my little notes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's
Like when you read that, I was like,
that's the one you
I am right there with you.
Picked out. Because like I had never heard of the term ironist. I mean, I know the term irony.
Irony, right.
I have an education. But in terms of philosophical context, I was like, oh, I now can call myself an ironist because this is exactly how I feel.
And maybe change it in the future.
Yeah. And I could even change maybe tomorrow I will decide to not be an ironist. Because I can choose to be something else.
Right. Yeah, because I can choose to be something else tomorrow.
Subject to change.
Or something new will come along that'll make you go, oh, I never thought about it like that. Yeah. Now things are different.
But it's just
while not thinking that's the final one.
Yes.
I think that's his entire point.
That doesn't mean I have to be an ironist forever. Right? Just because I identify with this idea right now, I kind of like, okay, this is kind of how I see myself. So I can call myself an ironist. But again, it's just language that we create.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not that I'm intrinsically an ironist, you know?
It's not some attribute of you.
It's that he created a word to call a certain type of perspective, you know? Mm-hmm. Which resonates with me, right?
Yeah, it's like, so they know that the ironist knows that their identity is constructed through language. Mm-hmm. Okay, the stories we tell. This is like a big part of the ironist. Like, we know this is contingent. It could have been another way. We could be in a society that tells different stories. Yeah. We could have been Saddam Hussein's son, where our whole story was just completely different, and we just turned into that story. Mm-hmm. And then they understand that the vocabulary is contingent, which goes into that. And then they still, even knowing that it's not some objective thing, they still engage in the process, like despite it, but not in like an absurdist way where you're like, oh, there's no meaning, I guess I'll keep going. It's more like the power to create is ours, which is in itself such a powerful narrative, to be able to do. And so, of course, I will continue going forward because I know that I can create the best version of myself. Mm-hmm. And not only that, I can help create the best version of society.
Yeah. And solidarity. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this concept of contingency, if we can accept that everything, how we define ourselves, how we define society is contingent, it's really hard if you've lived most of your life thinking like, no, I know who I am. I wouldn't be anybody different, but things could have been different. I could have been born with different parents. I could have been born, without a lot of money. I could have, so my whole, it does sort of, it can be tough to wrap your mind around like who you are is contingent.
I know. It doesn't seem. We all feel so special, and we are, and maybe that's what makes us more special.
Yeah, I mean I feel like because I'm an actor, and I feel like I can understand this concept of contingency pretty well, just because I am fully aware that I can change if I choose to, and step into a different mindset.
And also, as an actor, I mean, how many times has playing a role for a long time changed that person?
Oh, that's a great question. And I can only speak for myself. I don't know about other actors, but it definitely I feel like there's all these different human beings living in me now.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I play a role, I feel like a part of that person will always be
Stays with you.
with
I
me.
think that's a common sentiment,
Yeah.
and I honestly don't see how it could be any different.
And
Like,
I choose who I want to be. Like in my daily life,
right.
like I choose the good guys usually. I try to choose the good path,
Yeah.
but I feel like, yeah. So I can personally relate to this concept of contingency. I think it's a beautiful way of kind of reminding ourselves maybe we shouldn't take ourselves too seriously.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, yeah.
I really like a lot of what he says. So are there any other quotes that really resonated with you or
Um, well, some that are still kind of part, some that are just kind of like add-ons to stuff that we've kind of done, but other
yeah.
quotes like the most that the ironist can do is redescribe herself to her. Oh, by the way, Rorty uses herself
I noticed
to talk
that.
about you because every other, I don't, I think he's just cool like that. I think he was
Yeah.
just like totally on the level because everybody else would say himself.
Yeah, I noticed that. I was like, so he doesn't use himself or
He uses herself.
yeah, which interesting.
I'm
I
here
think
for
it's
it.
cool.
I think it's super cool. I think he did it specifically to be like, we'll use him, so why can't I use her? You know what I'm saying? It's the same.
It's contingent.
It's all contingent. But I always thought that was like a cool thing that he did. It's in all his
Yeah.
books.
Yeah.
He always says herself.
Yeah. All of his books,
All of his
really.
books.
Okay.
He always talks. Yeah. The most the ironist can do is redescribe herself to herself using a vocabulary that is deliberately ungrounded. Um,
The most the ironist can do. Well, I'd like to think maybe I shouldn't identify as an ironist now because I like to think I can do more than just that.
well, kind of what he means as, what I think what he means is like, because he always talks about like the poet philosopher taking over like the role of the traditional philosopher, and not the philosopher king, but the poet king. This
Mhm.
is who we want leading, the person that can tell the best story. And here, this is somebody who is capable of rewriting themselves. There's somebody who has harnessed the power of being able to do this. And even though knowing all vocabularies are contingent, still models this freedom for others. They go,
Mhm.
look at my story.
Mhm.
And that's how you. So when it says something like the most an iris can do is redescribe herself to herself using a vocabulary that's deliberately ungrounded. He's saying that that's special. It's not unlike it makes it almost more I don't want to say like pure, but like noble or something like that, where it's like um knowing that there is no like real grounding. It's like deliberately ungrounded.
Limitless.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
limitless. It becomes limitless. It's deliberately ungrounded because you want to leave that space open to grow
And
even
change.
more.
Yeah, I feel like it gives you the power to feel limitless. Like who I am is limitless.
Mm-hmm.
I can continue to redescribe myself to myself. But I wonder if he's also sort of suggesting like, yes, we can redescribe ourselves, but we can't do that for other people.
Yes, but you can model that for other people.
Yes. Yeah.
That's kind of what
It.
he's saying.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you can be that person that goes, "Hey, you ever thought about just redescribing yourself?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, like and Jesus is one of those big models.
Yeah.
Probably the most prolific model
Yeah.
of like or the one
Most famous.
the one whose story spread the most.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a couple other quotes. It's kind of the same stuff, but like the novelist, the journalist, the playwright are our new moral educators. Um,
Do you agree with that? Like the novelists, the playwrights, the journalists, they have more of an impact on our education than the actual
our moral
a
education.
moral education.
I do.
Yeah.
I think so. I think that I have gotten more, you know, ethics and morality is such a tricky subject to even like what does it even pertain to begin with. But I have found all sorts of stuff through film, through even television, and through even like awesome journalism. You know, them that an awesome journalist can garner up some solidarity for sure by showing you the story. Yeah. And show it in a way that works. But I even think about like just being affected by something. Like I really love Noah Baumbach.
Okay, I've heard of him. I
So
don't know much about him though.
he has a movie called The Squid and the Whale.
Okay, I haven't seen it yet.
And I went into that movie not knowing anything about it. And when I got done, I was like, that was such a great movie. And it made me like rethink like my childhood and like why I do things and all this stuff. It gave me like this story to like explore myself.
Yeah.
Through the characters.
Mm-hmm.
And it, I don't know if I've ever like specifically thought about it this way, but it may have made me more moral or more empathetic or more, tuned in or something to like how people feel. And also there was a sense of solidarity with watching this thing and seeing the characters and being like, I see some of myself in that, and then they're exploring something that I can now explore about myself. That to me, that is way more powerful than, a philosopher being like, we shouldn't lie.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, I appreciate the sentiment, but it doesn't do a lot. It doesn't do as much for me.
Yeah.
Like we all know we shouldn't lie unless you should. And then there's like 1,000 gray areas in between.
But one of my favorite childhood books was The Boy Who Cried Wolf. You remember that one?
Do I?
I mean, everybody knows that one.
Yeah.
But I mean, that is a great story that teaches you why you should lie. The ramifications of lying. I mean, to actually follow that narrative is so much more powerful than just listening to someone say, don't lie.
Mm-hmm. Right. So. Yeah, it gives you like, and even with, well, like I used to love all the Aesop's fables.
Oh, me too. Yeah.
Oh man, they were the best.
Yeah, they all had little lessons.
Every single one of them.
They were really cute. And,
all animals, yeah. So yeah.
One thing I know he does talk about in the book as well is how solidarity is made, not given, not eternally true. It's something we make.
Right. It's not a property of the universe.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, whereas, some people might argue that no, we are naturally all connected,
all one,
and it's our intrinsic nature that we are all one, which I really like that idea that it's
pretty.
It is the nature of the universe that we are all one. I love that idea.
I don't think Rorty would have any problem saying that, because if the language works.
The language works. Yeah, if you use the right language.
if the story that we're, if you can take, Rorty's not going to say the scientist is wrong. He's going to say science is science. Rorty would look at everything like genres. You literally have to think about him thinking like science is a genre. It's a literary genre.
I like that. Yeah.
Where we talk within this genre. And it's so imagine like, your friend, has a breakup from like a long-term relationship or something like that. And you go up and you go, well, it's probably messing with your dopamine. And, heartache can be bad because like once they leave, these chemicals in your brain, and then they all get all wiry and stuff. So hope you feel better. Right? You're not going to do that. Yeah. It's not an appropriate language for that moment.
Oh my gosh. So what you're saying right now, it reminds me of a play I literally just saw my friends perform at the Robert Mello Studio. It's called The Effect. And the entire play is all about studying people scientifically, trying to understand the science behind love.
Oh, right.
And so they do these like, they give them these like pills and they test they test how the pills affect their brain. And it's all about looking at love through science. Is love just dopamine and oxytocin, right? Or
Mhm.
can we talk about love in a different lens?
That is
So,
right in it.
yeah.
And you know what? Um, I should have had that off, huh? What is it, amateur hour? Uh, but you know, sometimes it does make sense to talk about stuff like that in a scientific way,
Yeah.
and that's fine. Maybe there is something wrong with their dopamine. You know what I'm saying? Maybe there's like a chemical imbalance, and in that way, it's just fine. And it's good that we know that kind of stuff about love. That there are these other things going on that might, you might find somebody goes, you know what, that really did help me knowing that's just dopamine being depleted and stuff like that. And but realistically, it's something that we can't quite reduce down to any one thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And and when you go and you talk to a friend, you go, oh, man, I'm sorry it's happened to you. Maybe you might say, I've been through it before, and I just want you to know I'm here for you, and that it's going to get better in time. And here's a cool playlist of songs that I listen to when I feel, this is the kind of support you give them, right? Telling them this is the story of the brain and how it reacts to love it's not usually going to work as well. It's just not going to work.
Yeah.
So there's different genres that you want to talk to people in when this kind of stuff pops up. And but you also wouldn't go to like a scientific conference and start talking about like, anytime I start to think about what happens with love, I think about these songs. It's just an inappropriate genre at the time.
We were talking about how oxytocin gets released from physical touch, and but I think it's important to examine our experience through multiple lenses and not get attached to just one lens.
Yes, and this is, if you read more Rorty, you will see that what he wants in like his ideal society is a collaboration between them all.
Yeah.
That's like if you read into it, he will go, I want the scientist talking to the philosophy department, talking to the art department. I want all these people working in tandem.
Yeah.
I don't want them to be in opposition to each other.
They're not necessarily in opposition.
They're not.
They're just using different
language
to describe something that we're trying to understand.
Yes, and a lot of times, you can find stuff. I'm pretty political, and I pride myself in being able to find like common ground with people that on the surface seems like there's very little common ground with. But it's trying at times, but it's totally worth it when you do it, when you can synthesize these two different languages.
Yes, and if you apply the last quote, one of the quotes I read of his that talked about learning how to speak differently as opposed to trying to win an argument.
Yes.
Learning how to speak differently is what's going to help bring us together.
Yes.
And bring about solidarity versus just trying to win.
Right.
Win an argument.
And like how do we as a society speak about this? We've done this so many times. We've done it with so many like minority groups. God, I remember showing my son Ace Ventura, and then get in the.
It's very nostalgic for me.
It's very nostalgic, and I was like, the trans narrative here is pretty rough.
Oh gosh, I almost forgot about that.
I literally had just forgot about it.
Yeah.
And then I was
Finkel is Einstein. Finkel.
Right.
Einstein
And
Finkel.
Right. And I was like, oh, I can kind of see now. It didn't seem like that at the time because the story is like, well, you can just kind of make fun of that stuff, and it wasn't a big deal. And
back then, it wasn't.
And I'm not going to hold the past to the standards of today. But I remember being like watching it with my kid, be like, "Oh, this is gonna be hilarious," and being like, "Oh."
I forgot that was even in the movie. Yeah, it's been so long.
Me too.
Yeah,
me too. And but we changed the narrative about that stuff.
Yeah,
we change it as a society.
Well, some of us have changed the narrative. Others,
the trans stuff is currently happening.
Still very controversial.
But even look at like. how gay people were treated like in the
Yeah.
70s and 80s compared to now.
But everyone is still on a different page. I mean, there's more commonality now about it, but there's still division, and it's still controversial.
Listen, we're still rolling the ball up the hill.
We're still
okay?
rolling the ball.
So
up the
this
hill.
is you don't ever just get to the top.
Yeah.
You shoot for the stars, you hit the moon. We do the best we can, but there are other things that that it's like, I mean, we still haven't even got over the effects of slavery. But the fact is that you can still look in the past and be like, 500 years ago, things were a lot worse.
Yes.
We are obviously operating within a 100-year lifespan for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's hard to like look back and be like, oh, I didn't really make a lot of progress while I was alive, but it's still happening. It's still the narratives are switching.
I think it's great that you're able to have a conversation with someone who has a different political ideology and find common ground. I think the key to doing that is such a simple thing. It's a hard thing for many people, but it's so simple. Talk with the intention of trying to understand, as opposed to trying to be right, as opposed to trying to. So if I'm talking to you, it's instead of me just thinking about how do I make him understand me, shifting your perspective. Okay, how can I understand him? Asking you questions, trying to understand you better. So if I'm talking to you with the intention of trying to understand why you think what you think, and if you're talking to me with the intention of just trying to understand, whether you agree or not, but if you're trying to at least understand, I think that's the only way that we can ever find common ground. Because even if we disagree, at least I can kind of understand why you think the way you do. And that's not necessarily going to change my mind, but I can respect it without being hateful.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think I go into it assuming that we do often have similar values.
Oh, interesting. See, well, that's you. That's
so but not in a not on the surface.
Yeah.
It doesn't appear that way on the surface. But what I'm saying is that like on the most basic level. So what I try to do is just bring it back, because you can kind of like get back to a point and they go, well, I just care about this. And you go, okay, so that's your end point? All right, well, okay, now we have to try and find somewhere around there that we can agree. And then I need to try to, not need to, but I'm going to try and take you off on my path of where, okay, so we're kind of here and we've gone like this from that point. So how do I like kind of bring you back and say, I now understand how you got there. Now understand how I got here.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, one of my favorite ways to do it is to not use any buzzwords that people are used to.
Yeah. Words can be very triggering.
Yeah.
Different language. Learning how to speak differently.
Yes. It's precisely. So what you do is you don't say anything that has become a meme, or a buzzword that just like is so loaded.
I also think that I don't even like using the words Republican, Democrat, liberal, libertarian. I don't even like those words.
It's tough because they're so because nobody even really knows what they mean anymore.
Because the lines have gotten so blurred.
Yeah.
And now there's a whole different characterization of the left now.
Of what it means, yeah.
So
like you basically, when things become that complex after, centuries of building on different political ideologies and you pretty much have to know the entire history of something to have the conversation. Mm-hmm. So, when, like, let's say like Trump calls Biden a communist, right? It's lost all meaning at that point because if Biden's a communist, then what am I?
I guess If
You know
you
what?
voted for Biden, does that mean you're a communist? Like,
I'm way to the left of Biden. So, like, what does that make me? If he's a communist, then I have to be something like a neo-communist. I don't know. So it does, and words are thrown around, and they do lose a lot of meaning when something becomes once again so ambiguous and applies to so many people that it doesn't even apply to anything anymore.
yeah.
It's just it doesn't even mean anything. So I do try to use all my reasonings and my values without saying any of the words that people are used to.
Yeah. I think that's what Rorty's saying is a way that we can evolve
You speak differently.
and speak differently and find solidarity. So I try.
Yeah, and you know what? The reason I do that is because out of necessity of what works,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
once again, it's kind of back to the pragmatism thing again. It's like, well, if I didn't do that and I just said, "Hey, have you ever thought about socialism?"
Yeah.
And it's such a loaded word, but they don't understand that, they're going, "Oh, like Soviet Russia?" And I'm like, "No." And then I have to like disavow that whole thing. And then like, it just makes more sense to just go ahead and start kind of like on the same level and be like, how do you feel about, hardworking Americans?
Yeah, start with something you can agree on. And
Do you love the working class in America?
Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah.
Then we're there.
Yeah, how do you feel about and I totally lost my train of thought.
Every time you lose your train of thought, it's a chance to develop a new one.
Yes. Oh yes,
Okay.
this is what I was gonna say.
Okay.
It's that we I feel like it's hard to have political conversations. And going back to this idea of narratives and
Mhm.
stories, I'm curious to ask you a question. What you think about this? Because um, Hollywood nowadays are rewriting old narratives
Mhm.
in the film context
Oh yeah.
and putting their political messaging in there.
Mhm.
And I have mixed feelings about that because I think it is important to have a meaning to what you're saying, to have a message, but that can also be interpreted as propaganda or just overwrought political, on the nose. So, for instance, just an example,
Okay.
the Snow White movie
Mhm.
from 1937, they retold the narrative with a live action Hispanic actress, and she's very outspoken about
Mhm.
her politics. But the movie, regardless of that, the movie itself was very much political messaging. And on one hand, I can appreciate like having a very clear and specific message, but on the other hand, I wonder, is that good art? Is that
So my opinion is it's a lot.
I know it's
It's a lot. I do think I don't necessarily trust gigantic money making machines to do anything but virtue signal.
I
Because I think that they're thinking like, oh man, they probably started it before they realized that the progressive train wasn't working as well as it used to.
So you think it was just all like, okay, we're just gonna like, we don't even necessarily believe the message. We're just gonna put the message in here
No,
to make money.
The stockholders don't give a crap. Okay, I don't think they give a. I
Yeah.
don't. The people who are funding the film, no, I don't think they give a crap. They only care about one thing, and that's whether the movie's going to make money. And I think that they will probably now, after the pretty abysmal box office.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like the worst it could have been, but it was pretty bad.
Oh god, it got horrible reviews. I haven't read one good review about it from people on both sides of the political. Nobody liked the movie.
Yeah,
from what I can tell.
I tend to be so not conservative that I kind of do sometimes get a little kick of just like, oh, the conservatives hated it. It could be good. So I kind of, but that's just because I'm kind of I got like a little punk rock in me that's always been a little bit like anti, tradition,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
oh man, stick it to them kind of thing. So that's
Yeah.
probably just that kind of coming out. But I mean, honestly, the why even use Snow White to tell that story?
That was my thing. It's like I I don't understand, why don't you just create a whole new narrative? Why retell that?
The Barbie movie worked.
It did for a lot of people, but not everyone.
They made a
It
ton of
it
money.
definitely made a ton of
It
money
was
though. Yeah,
wildly
it definitely made a ton of
successful.
money. But as far as like the messaging, it still was divisive. But I mean,
Yeah, but I mean, any time I mean, honestly, I didn't even see the Barbie movie when it came out. I did see Oppenheimer, but I did, but I did finally watch it, and I was like, oh, that was cute. That was funny. There's some funny stuff going on. It had been so hyped up for so long that
it's too hyped up. You have high expectations.
it was so hyped up. But I do keep that in mind now when I go do stuff. I'm like, don't want to get too hyped up,
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, but Barbie wasn't an established story like Snow White.
No.
And so that's the kind of movie you could do that with and be
Yeah,
successful,
there
because
is
you're
no-
not sitting there going, let's take Snow White, the beloved 1930s movie and beloved story that is so iconic that everybody literally knows about the story of Snow White, and especially the Disney version of it. And let's flip that on its head in a time where the culture wars are raging as a white hot fire that is just burning everything in sight. And so I think it was a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off. It didn't. And just find another story, honestly.
Create your own story.
And I don't, I honestly have not seen one live action Disney.
Remake. I'm so tired of the remakes.
I haven't seen it. It seems lazy.
I think it is lazy. I think it's lazy. I mean, A Star is Born, that movie was remade, I think, 7 times. It's lazy.
There's so many stories out there.
Create a new story that hasn't been told yet. I understand it's hard because many films just feel like a retelling of other films. But whenever a film comes along that aims to be original, and when a film comes along that surprises me, even if I don't necessarily love the story, if it's original, I always am impressed.
And you know what? And I think you probably agree with this too, but like, you can tell the same story, just invent new characters. Yeah. There's so many things that are the same story, but like, I mean, how many movies are Star Wars? It's like the Harry Potter Star Wars thing, right? It's like the same exact story kind of, but at the same time, it's like, because people really want to see character driven stories. That's like what makes this kind of stuff happen. It's not just the plot.
Yeah.
It's you being able to connect with the characters in it. And so, if Snow White is already an established character that we know as one certain way, why use her to tell a different story?
Yeah.
Come up with a new character.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if they would have called it Snow Black, but I don't think that would have worked either. They just get away from it. Make something new. You could almost tell the exact same story, and with just making new characters and just calling it something different, completely different.
Call it Esmeralda.
call it like anything else, and just make your own characters. But whether it's a typical hero story or whatever, it's the characters that you want to see.
Yeah.
It's not. It's like, for instance, like Game of Thrones was huge. Obviously, nobody cares for the ending of it, but when Game of Thrones was on and kicking, it was like the thing.
Oh yeah.
And when you really look at it, it wasn't really any kind of new story. It was fantasy, like kind of dragons and knights and stuff. And there were great. I mean, there were great twists and blah 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 blah. It was all character driven though.
And it was told in a different way. It was still unique in the way. It was similar story, but the way that it was told.
I think because of the characters.
And the characters.
I think the only way you could tell that story that uniquely is because the characters were so rich.
Yeah.
And so, and once again, talk about morally ambiguous characters.
Oh gosh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
There's not a good or bad guy in sight. It's just all who knows.
Everyone's good and bad. Yeah.
But I think that's why it worked,
Yeah.
because it's not like it was some new inventive dragons and dire wolves and knights and people, like there's nothing new about the concept, but the characters were new.
Characters are what makes it unique.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why I think the live action stuff where they're trying to insert other stories into it is not paying off for them. They're not effectively telling a different story. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Well, I also feel like when you tell a new story, I think it's more effective if you have a new idea. If you're just telling the same idea, I mean, been there, done that. I don't understand why just repeating the same stories over and over again it would appeal to anyone.
Yeah.
So, and also if you've studied film or even if you just watched a lot of films, it can become predictable and boring. I get bored really easily watching movies I can predict. So,
yeah, no, me too.
And stories I can predict. So, whenever I read a book that I can't predict,
I know. Well, I feel the same way about music.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I get like even the stuff that I write, I have to like throw a wrench in my own stuff sometimes because I'm like,
well, there's a formula. I mean, you learn the chords, you learn melodies. There's a formula to filmmaking, just like there's a formula to music making. Just like any artist, whether you're a painter, you have to kind of learn the structure. But when you can learn the structure and then kind of color outside the lines,
that's the years and years of just putting in the effort to be a student of it. And look at like Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah.
Right? That guy was just nothing but a movie lover.
Yeah.
He just knew everything about movies and he learned every little trope and every little thing and watched all sorts of weird movies and just, anything he can get his hands on. He knew who produced it. He knew everything about it. And he was a student of film.
Yeah.
And he's even said that the very first film that he tried to make was terrible. He was like, oh, I got all the footage back. He's like, I was renting a camera on the weekends and shooting a film and I got it back. And it was not what I thought it was when I shot it. But then he goes on to probably redefine film more than anybody else in the past 30, 40 years. There hasn't been a paradigm shift like that. When Pulp Fiction came out, it changed everything. It changed everything that could be done with movies.
There was no movie like it before.
No. And it came from just a guy who knew everything about movies. He took and this is hilarious because I think about this kind of stuff too in music. He took, what do I love about Westerns? What do I love about Kung Fu movies? What do I love about this kind of movie? What do I love about, and he said, these are all my favorite things. I'm going to put them all together in one movie.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because he is such a student. He knew all the stuff about it. Yeah. And I always think about that in my music. I'm like, ooh, what if I got Nirvana and Tears for Fears and they had a baby with Radiohead?
Oh my gosh, I would love to listen to that music.
Okay, I'll let you listen to the album afterwards. But that's the kind of stuff that I think about. You know what I'm saying? That's the kind of stuff that, because this is a realization I came to a few years ago when I started working on this stuff. But as an artist, you're selling your aesthetic.
Yeah.
You're not selling anything else. And authenticity is such a commodity these days. Right? Yeah. And not only is it a commodity, but people can sniff it out better than ever. So when you really come across with something that is the best you can do is do what you love and say, hey, this is the type of stuff that I love. If I was to write, and I've done it before, and I'm fine with it, as I was being a student at the time. If I was to write for like, what would people like? What would somebody else like? It's like, okay, I can do that. And I did do it, and I have done it. And I'm not ashamed of it. I took it as a personal challenge. Like, oh, okay, well, can I make something that people like? And I could. But what really speaks to me is like, do I like it? Is it something that I would like to listen to? Is it something that I would be proud to be part of? Is it something that if I heard that if I didn't do it and I heard it on the radio, would I be like, that's awesome? And that needs to be my number one litmus test for it.
I love that because it's your own craft. It's your own voice. You're not just trying to please the crowd. You're trying to express your unique voice.
Yes, but then also it is that because what it is your unique taste.
Yeah.
And so when you think about how Tarantino did Pulp Fiction and all those movies by taking his favorite stuff and combining them all into one super genre,
he created his own genre
by taking all the best parts of all these genres. And so in a way, you know, it's about combining these things. And think about like a lot of like the musical milestones in history have been like two unsuspecting styles coming together to make something new, you know, like in some kind of weird like musical Voltron that is just like turned into something else entirely, you know, bigger than the sum of its parts. But it took somebody going, hey, you know, it's like you know, hip hop and jazz music. You know, like somebody in the 90s with like Diggable Planets, like I'm cool like that. I'm cool like da, 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 da. And then they're like, what if we took this jazz stuff and then did like what the people in New York have been doing on the streets, rapping over it and put it together? And it's like, this is the coolest thing I've ever heard in my life, you know? And then we got, you know, Flip Fantasia, Cantaloupe. And so you get all these, so you do kind of invent new genres by doing that.
Yeah.
And literally Pulp Fiction was, when it came out, I saw it in the movie theater.
Oh.
That's how old I am. I saw it in the movie theater on Christmas Eve in 1994.
Happy little Christmas.
In 1994, I lived over off of Tilly Mill.
Oh.
And there was a movie theater right there across from the Home Depot. And I walked down there with my cousin and I saw Pulp Fiction, had no idea what it was about.
Oh gosh.
Right?
That movie is very surprising. If you have no idea what you're getting in for, it's like, what is this?
Yeah, I'm surprised the guy let me in. I mean, I was young.
Yeah.
I was like really young.
Yeah.
Oh, anyways.
But yeah, so I guess any thoughts you want to share to kind of summarize Rorty and Contingency, irony, solidarity?
Yeah, I think it's cool that he separates it into those three parts. And I also think that it's cool that you have no idea what they mean until you start reading it, like really together.
Oh yeah.
Like what could these possibly mean together?
Those terms, I was like,
I know what they all mean individually.
Yeah. But all together, he like reinvents the terms by combining them together.
And then it's a full circle. It's funny how he did that, huh? I think it is. I think he takes the pragmatist tradition of there are no facts, they're just interpretations, and says, okay, we're pretty much sold on the idea that everything's contingent. Everything could have been another way, but it's this way. And everything could be another way in the future. It doesn't have to go one way. You know, this is the rebirth, the invention, the whatever. And then he goes, and I realize that this is ironic that we would keep going forward knowing this, because traditionally this was nihilism, but we're moving past nihilism into ironism. We're going to do it anyways. And unlike absurdism, where we go, it's meaningless, but we'll do it anyways, we're going to go, no, this is even better than we ever thought.
Yeah.
Because what it does is it gives us a chance to shoot for that solidarity, to invent the narrative, to say, I know what it's like to suffer, and I know what it's like to be happy. I know what negative experience feels like. I know what positive experience feels like.
Mm-hmm.
And I also realized that I can connect with people on levels that I never thought before through these stories. And I want people to have positive experience and to avoid any unnecessary negative experience that they can. And I hope the generations ahead of me get even better at it.
Yeah.
By continuing to improve the narrative and empathy and ultimately solidarity as all experiencing people. So I think I think it's a really cool book. He's got a lot of other cool books too.
Yeah. Have you read other books of
Uh-huh.
his? Okay.
I have some other books too. The Philosophy and the Mirror of Nature is kind of like his um the big book that kind of changed everything for him.
Yeah.
That when he brought it out, everybody was like,
That was like his big deal.
it was a big deal.
Yeah.
It was a big
Okay.
deal. Because he started to he kind of brought back the pragmatists
Okay.
that everybody had kind of like forgotten about.
Yeah.
And they're beautiful. Go read some of William James.
Mm-hmm.
He was a pragmatist philosopher. What a great writer. Just beautiful.
Yeah.
It's just beautiful. And then Dewey, who if you know any educators,
Mm-hmm.
they will have studied Dewey. And Dewey was a pragmatist and probably one of Rorty's favorite philosophers. But nobody took him seriously after a while. And after Rorty came out with that book, people were like, Dewey? Oh yeah, he was pretty cool now that I think about it. So yeah, check out anytime you get a chance. Man, there's some videos of him talking about stuff too that you can just throw on.
YouTube.
There's one called Of Beauty and Consolation.
Oh, that sounds pretty.
Yeah, it is.
Of beauty and constellation.
And he talks about Nabokov and just like how good he is with the English language, even though it wasn't even his first language. And then you go and you read something like Nabokov has a book called Pale Fire.
Okay.
And it opens up and you're just like, what are these words? It's like they're a magic spell.
Yeah.
They're just so good. Like, who did this? And so he goes into a lot of that. He's, it's all about like Rorty also, his favorite thing is bird watching.
Oh, that's so funny. I used to bird watch when I was younger. Actually, by myself I was like a dork, and
Well, then you will love.
I think I could relate to him on that.
You would love because there's actually a video of on that right there, and that's like an hour-long interview.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Well, tell me about," because he's talking about beauty, and he goes, "All right," and then they show him out looking at birds.
That's so funny. That's cool.
And he's just like, "Wow, that one over there," and you could just. And he's like, this is what it's all about, man.
Aww. The more I learn about this guy, the more I'm intrigued. I really like how he kind of takes, again, this is like going back to this idea of borrowing from other people's narratives and sort of combining them into something new. I think Ludwig Wittgenstein, I always mispronounce his name. Wittgenstein, he said he was all about perhaps there is no objective truth, only interpretation. And that's kind of what he's saying here, but he's creating his own kind of language to help us understand it in a slightly different way.
Rorty would say that he is following up on Wittgenstein.
Yeah, he's like expanding on that concept. So he's taking one concept, expanding on it, using different vocabulary, he coined the term, and being an ironist. So and I think that if you haven't read the book, I encourage you to read it. I think it can open your mind in a way that makes you think about your life not so seriously, and in a way that makes you feel a sense of freedom to choose your own path and not be limited by how other people define you, not be limited by your past. Because if you accept the notion that your life and everything that we call truth is contingent, if you can accept that, that gives you the freedom to know that anything can change. everything is subject to change. And I think there's freedom and power in that. So if you haven't read the book, I recommend it. And I love talking to you about this
This
stuff.
was great.
So thank you so much.
We'll have to do it again. We'll have to now that we've broken the ice.
Yeah.
In spectacular fashion too.
Yeah.
I feel like we really went deep. Maybe we could just get together every now and then and throw one of these together.
We should pick a topic, or pick a book, pick a philosopher, and just dive deep. I love this stuff. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
And if you're listening or watching, comment, let us know your thoughts. Let us know if you think we're crazy. Let us know if you think we're wrong. Join the conversation. So I'd love to hear from you.
Nice.
All right.
Awesome. Perfect. Yay.
Yay. And cut.